The ship landed on a world that Park Yuna had only seen in pictures. The sky was purple. The buildings were tall and made of something that looked like glass but shone like silver. Everything was beautiful. Everything was also very, very large. Yuna stepped off the ship behind Ambassador Kang Do-hyun and the rest of the human team. There were only 12 of them. 12 humans to represent all of Earth at the Celestial Summit. She looked around at the other species walking through the landing area. Some were tall with 4 arms. Some floated above the ground. Some had skin that changed colors as they moved. And then there were the Volanthi. The Volanthi were the rulers of this part of the galaxy. They had silver skin and eyes that glowed in different colors. They moved like water, smooth and graceful. They had lived for thousands of years. They had built empires while humans were still learning to make fire. And they did not care about humans at all. Yuna watched as a group of Volanthi walked past. They did not even look at the human team. It was like the humans were not there. Like they were invisible. "Stay close," Ambassador Do-hyun said quietly. "Stay quiet. We are guests here. Very small guests." Yuna nodded. She understood. Humanity was new to space travel. They had only discovered faster-than-light engines 50 years ago. To these ancient species, humans were like children who had just learned to walk. Not important. Not interesting. Just there. The summit was held in a massive building at the center of the city. Inside, thousands of beings from hundreds of species gathered to make deals, form alliances, and decide the future of the galaxy. The human team was given a small room in a far corner. No one visited them. No one invited them to meetings. On the second day, Yuna got lost. She had gone to find water. The building was confusing, with hallways that curved and stairs that went in strange directions. She turned left when she should have turned right, and suddenly she was in a part of the building she did not recognize. The hallway was empty, except for one person. A Volanthi lord stood near a window, his silver skin bright under the strange lights. He turned when he heard her footsteps. "What is this?" he said. His voice was cold. "A human? Walking alone in the upper halls?" Yuna stopped. Her heart beat fast, but she kept her face calm. "I apologize. I was looking for the refreshment area. I took a wrong turn." The Lord walked toward her. He was very tall. He looked down at her like she was an insect. "Your kind should not be here," he said. "You should be in your little room, waiting until someone important has time to see you. If anyone ever does." Yuna felt anger rise in her chest, but she pushed it down. She kept her voice steady. "I meant no disrespect," she said. "I will leave now." She turned to go, but the Lord grabbed her arm. His grip was strong. Too strong. "I did not say you could leave," he said. "Perhaps I should teach you how to show proper respect to your betters." Yuna looked at his hand on her arm. Then she looked up at his face. She did not cry. She did not beg. She met his glowing eyes with her own dark ones. "Let go of me," she said. Her voice was quiet but firm. "Please." The Lord laughed. "Or what? What will you do, little human?" "Nothing," Yuna said. "I can do nothing to you. You are stronger than me. You are older than me. You are more powerful than me. But I am asking you, as one thinking being to another, to let go of my arm." The Lord stared at her. No one spoke to a Volanthi lord this way. No lesser species ever looked them in the eye and spoke with such calm dignity. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a voice came from the shadows. "Release her." The Lord's face changed. Fear flashed in his eyes. He let go of Yuna's arm immediately and stepped back. "Your Highness," he said, bowing low. "I did not know you were. Leave." The Lord hurried away without another word. Yuna turned to see who had saved her. A young Volanthi woman stepped out of the darkness. She was beautiful in a cold way, like a statue made of moonlight. Her eyes were violet, deep and endless. She wore simple clothes, but something about her said she was important. Very important. This was Princess Hound, the youngest daughter of Queen Soren herself. Hound walked slowly around Yuna, studying her from every angle. Yuna stood still and let her look. She did not bow. She did not speak. She just waited. "You're a human," Hound said finally. "Yes, you were not afraid of him." Yuna thought about this. "I was afraid," she admitted. But being afraid and showing fear are different things. Hound stopped in front of her. Their eyes met. Violet looked into Brown. Ancient looked into Young. "Interesting," the princess said softly. She said nothing else. She simply turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows as quietly as she had come. Yuna stood alone in the empty hallway. Her heart was still beating fast. She did not understand what had just happened, but she felt somehow that her life had just changed. She did not know how right she was. Somewhere in the palace, Princess Hound walked through dark corridors, thinking about what she had seen. She had watched thousands of beings come to these summits over the centuries. She had seen them bow and scrape and beg for favor. She had never seen one simply stand there and ask to be treated with dignity. The human was small. The human was weak. The human would live for less than 100 years. But there was something in those dark eyes. Something that burned. Hound smiled for the first time in a very long while. She wanted to see that fire again. 3 days passed after the incident in the hallway. Yuna told no one what had happened. She went back to her work, helping Ambassador Do-young with papers and translations. She tried to forget the violet eyes of the princess, but she could not forget. On the 5th day of the summit, there was a grand banquet. Every species was invited. It was a chance to make connections, to show strength, to prove that your people mattered. The human team dressed in their best clothes. Yuna wore a simple black dress. It was not fancy, but it was clean and proper. She walked into the great hall with her head held high. The hall was enormous. 1,000 beings sat at long tables that stretched from one end to the other. Light came from floating crystals above. Music played from somewhere, soft and strange. At the far end of the hall, on a raised platform, sat the Volantha royal family. Queen Soren was there. She was old beyond counting, but she looked young and terrible and beautiful. Her skin was pure silver. Her eyes were gold. She sat on her throne like she owned the universe. And in many ways she did. Beside her sat her daughters. 3 of them. The oldest 2 were tall and proud, dressed in shining clothes. They talked and laughed with the nobles around them. The youngest daughter sat apart from the others. She wore dark clothes. She did not talk. She did not smile. She simply watched the room with those violet eyes. Princess Hound. Yuna looked away quickly. She followed Ambassador Do-young to the human table. It was in a far corner, near the kitchens. The worst spot in the room. But at least they had been invited. The banquet went on. Food was served. Speeches were made. Ambassador Do-young tried to talk to other species, but most ignored him. A few laughed at him. One told him to go back to his little planet and stay there. Yuna watched all this. Her hands were fists under the table, but she said nothing. Then Lord Taiho stood up. He was the same Volanthi who had grabbed Yuna in the hallway. He had been drinking. His silver face was flushed with color. He walked to the center of the hall and raised his glass. "I would like to make a toast," he said loudly, "to the newest guests at our summit. The humans." The hall grew quiet. Some laughed. Others whispered. Lord Taiho smiled. It was not a kind smile. I have heard, he continued, that humans make excellent pets. They are small and soft. They follow commands. And they do not live very long, so you do not have to care for them for more than a few decades. More laughter. Louder this time. Perhaps, Lord Taiho said, I should buy one for my estate. Would any human like to volunteer? I promise to feed you well and give you a nice place to sleep. He looked directly at the human table. Directly at Yuna. What about you, little one? You seemed so brave when we last met. Would you like to be my pet? Yuna felt every eye in the hall turned to her. Her face burned. Her heart pounded. Ambassador Dohyun put his hand on her arm, telling her silently to stay quiet, to let it pass. She wanted to stand up and scream. She wanted to throw something at that laughing face. But she knew it'd only make things worse. So she sat there, silent, her dignity the only weapon she had. Well, Lord Taiho said. Nothing to say? How disappoint. Enough. The word was not loud, but it cut through the hall like a blade. Every voice stopped. Every being turned toward the royal platform. Princess Hound was standing. The princess never stood during these events. She never spoke. She sat in her dark corner and watched and said nothing. For centuries, this had been her way. But now she was standing. Now she was walking down from the platform, her dark clothes flowing behind her like shadows. The hall was completely silent. Hound walked past the long tables. She walked past the staring faces. She walked past Lord Taiho, who had gone pale with fear. She walked all the way to the human table. She stopped in front of Yuna. Yuna looked up at her. She did not know what was happening. She did not know what to do. So she simply met those violet eyes and waited. Hound reached out her hand. Slowly, gently, she placed it on Yuna's shoulder. A gasp went through the hall. Yuna did not understand, but she saw the shock on every face. She saw Lord Taiho step backward like he had been struck. She saw the queen lean forward on her throne, golden eyes narrow and bright. Mine, Hound said. One word, just one word. But it changed everything. The hall exploded into whispers. Some beings stood up from their seats. Others called out questions. Lord Taiho opened his mouth to protest, but no sound came out. Yuna looked at the hand on her shoulder. In Volanti culture, she would learn later, this gesture meant something very important. It was the mark of personal claim. It meant that Hound was taking Yuna under her protection. It meant that anyone who touched Yuna would answer to the princess herself. It also meant something that had never happened before in the history of the Volanti Empire. A royal had claimed an alien. Queen Soren rose from her throne. The room fell silent again. Daughter, the queen said. Her voice was calm but cold. What is the meaning of this? Hound did not turn around. She kept her eyes on Yuna. This human showed more dignity in one moment than most of our court shows in a century, she said. She was threatened. She was mocked. She was offered nothing but cruelty. And she did not break. She did not beg. She simply asked to be treated as a thinking being. Hound finally turned to face her mother. If our empire cannot recognize worth when it stands before us, then perhaps our empire has forgotten what worth means. The queen stared at her daughter. No one breathed. Then, slowly, Queen Soren sat back down. She did not smile. She did not frown. She simply looked at Yuna with those ancient golden eyes. Very well, the queen said. The claim is witnessed. The human belongs to your household now, daughter. I hope you know what you are doing. Hound bowed to her mother. Then she turned back to Yuna and held out her hand. Come, she said softly. You do not belong in this corner anymore. Yuna did not understand any of this. She did not know what she had done to deserve this. She did not know what being claimed meant or what would happen next. But she looked at the princess's hand. She looked at those violet eyes, which were not cold anymore. There was something warm in them now. Something curious and alive. Yuna took her hand and stood up. Together, they walked out of the hall. Behind them, 1,000 beings watched in shock. And on her throne, Queen Soren watched most closely of all. She had noticed the human now. She would be watching very carefully from now on. Yuna woke up in a room more beautiful than anything she had ever seen. The bed was soft as clouds. The walls were made of that silver glass. Outside the window, she could see the purple sky and the towers of the city stretching toward the stars. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming. Then she remembered everything. The banquet. The hand on her shoulder. That single word, mine. It had been 3 days since Princess Hound had claimed her. 3 days of living in the royal palace. 3 days of servants bringing her food and clothes and looking at her with curious eyes. 3 days of not knowing what was happening or why. Hound visited her sometimes. The princess would come in the evening and sit with her, asking questions about Earth. What did the sky look like? What did humans eat? What did they dream about? Yuna answered as best she could, and something like friendship began to grow between them. But they were not left alone for long. On the 4th day, a servant came to Yuna's room. The servant bowed low and spoke in a careful voice. "The queen wishes to see you, alone." Yuna's heart stopped. Then it started again, beating very fast. She followed the servant through long hallways and up winding stairs. They came to a room at the top of a tall tower. The servant opened the door and stepped aside. "Go in," the servant said, "and may the stars protect you." That was not a comforting thing to hear. Yuna walked in. The room was simple compared to the rest of the palace. There was a table, 2 chairs, a window that looked out over the entire world. And sitting in one of the chairs was Queen Soren. The queen gestured to the empty chair. "Sit." Yuna sat. Her hands were shaking. She put them in her lap so the queen would not see. Queen Soren studied her for a long moment. Those golden eyes seemed to look right through her, seeing everything she was and everything she could be. "Do you know why you are here?" the queen asked. "No, your majesty. My daughter has claimed you. This has never happened before. A Volanti royal claiming an alien. It is unusual." "I did not ask to be claimed," Yuna said carefully. "No, you did not." The queen leaned forward. "So tell me, human, what are you?" Yuna did not understand the question. I am just a person. A diplomat's aide. Nobody important. That is not what I asked." The queen's voice sharpened. "What are humans? Your species lives for less than a century. You have no claws, no armor, no special powers. You discovered space travel yesterday, by our standards. By all logic, you should be nothing. You should be forgotten in the great story of the universe." The queen stood up and walked to the window. "And yet my daughter, who has shown interest in nothing for 200 years, looks at you like you hold the secret to the stars. Why?" Yuna thought about this. She thought about Earth, about all the wars and disasters and hard times, about how humanity had survived everything the universe had thrown at them. "We are small," she said finally. "We are weak. We are young. But we never stop trying. When we fall, we get up. When we fail, we try again. When we are told something is impossible, we find a way to do it anyway." She looked at the queen's back. "Maybe that is why. We do not accept limits, even when we should." The queen was silent for a long moment. Then she turned around. Her face showed nothing. "We will see," she said. "You will face the trials of worth." Yuna's blood went cold. She had heard of these trials. They were tests designed for Volanthi warriors. Tests of strength, speed, and mind. Tests that killed those who failed. "The trials are for Volanthi," Yuna said. "I am human. I will die." "Perhaps," the queen said. "But if you want to stay in my daughter's household, you must prove you deserve to be there. The trials begin tomorrow." Yuna wanted to argue. She wanted to refuse. But she looked into those golden eyes and saw that there was no choice. "I understand," she said. The trials were everything she had feared and worse. The first trial was strength. She had to move heavy stones from one side of a room to the other. The stones were meant for Volanthi muscles. Yuna could barely lift them, but she did not give up. She pushed. She pulled. She dragged them inch by inch across the floor. It took her 5 hours to do what a Volanthi could do in 5 minutes. But she did it. The second trial was speed. She had to run through a maze while blades swung from the walls. She was too slow. She could not dodge like a Volanthi could. By the end, her arms and legs were covered in cuts. But she survived. The third trial was mind. She was placed in a room of illusions. Voices whispered terrible things in her ears. Images showed her worst fears. Her family dying. Her world burning. Herself alone forever in the dark. She sat in the center of that room and closed her eyes. She thought of home. She thought of the people she loved. She thought of why she had come to space in the first place, to show the universe that humans mattered. The illusions could not break her because she knew who she was. Finally, there was the fourth trial. Endurance. She had to stand in a room that slowly filled with cold. The temperature dropped and dropped until ice formed on the walls. A Volanthi could survive this easily. Their bodies were made for extreme conditions. Yuna was not. The cold bit into her skin. Her fingers turned blue. Her breath came out in white clouds. Every part of her screamed to give up, to fall, to let the cold take her. But she thought of the princess. She thought of those violet eyes and that one word, mine. Someone believed she was worth something. Someone had chosen her when no one else would. She would not let that person down. Yuna stood in that freezing room until the trial ended. When the doors finally opened, she fell forward into the warm air outside. Her body was broken. Her mind was foggy. But she was alive. She had passed. When she opened her eyes, Princess Hound was there. The princess was holding her, keeping her from hitting the ground. "Why?" Hound whispered. There were tears in her ancient eyes. "Why do you keep fighting?" Yuna smiled weakly. Her lips were cracked. Her voice was rough. "Because someone told me I could not," she said. "And I do not accept limits." Hound stared at her. Then she laughed. It was a beautiful sound, like bells in the wind. "Humans," she said softly. "What a strange and wonderful species you are." She picked Yuna up and carried her away from the proving grounds. Behind them, hidden in the shadows, Queen Soren watched everything. The human had passed her trials. Perhaps there was more to these creatures than she had thought. Perhaps there was more to her daughter's choice than foolishness. The queen turned and walked away, thinking deeply about what she had seen. Yuna healed slowly. Human bodies were not as strong as Volanthi bodies. But she rested and ate good food and grew stronger day by day. Hound visited her every evening, and they talked for hours about everything and nothing. But even as Yuna healed, something dark was growing in the shadows of the palace. Lord Tayo had not forgotten his humiliation. Every night, he gathered with others who hated the change that Yuna represented. Old lords who thought aliens were beneath them. Young nobles who were jealous of the princess. politicians who saw an opportunity to grab power. They met in secret rooms and spoke in whispers. "The princess has made a fool of our empire," Lord Taiho said, his silver face twisted with anger. "She claimed a human. We are becoming a joke to the other species. What can we do?" asked another lord. "The queen allowed it. The claim is legal." "The queen is testing her daughter," said an old lady with cold eyes. "She wants to see if Hound is fit to rule someday. If we show that the princess's judgment is weak, if we prove that this human attachment is dangerous." Lord Taiho smiled his cruel smile. "Then Hound loses her place in the succession. Perhaps she is even sent away in disgrace. But how do we prove this?" Lord Taiho leaned forward. "We create a crisis. Something terrible happens to the princess, and we make sure everyone blames the humans." The plot was simple and evil. They would arrange for someone to attack Princess Hound during a public event. The attacker would use human weapons. They would leave human evidence. When the princess was hurt or worse, everyone would think the humans had done it. The human delegation would be thrown off the planet. Relations between humans and Volanthi would be destroyed forever. And Princess Hound would be shamed for trusting an alien. Lord Taiho and his friends were very pleased with their plan. But they made one mistake. They talked too loud. Yuna had been walking in the gardens late at night. She could not sleep. Her body still hurt from the trials, and her mind was full of thoughts. She liked to walk among the strange flowers and look at the stars. That night, she walked past a window that was slightly open. She heard voices inside. She heard Lord Taiho's name. She heard the word human. She heard the word attack. She stopped and listened. When she understood what they were planning, her blood turned to ice. They were going to hurt Hound. They were going to blame her people. They were going to destroy everything. She ran back to her room and tried to think. She could tell Hound, but would the princess believe her? Would anyone believe a human making accusations against Volanthi lords? She could tell Ambassador Doyen, but the human delegation had no power here. No one would listen to them. She could tell the queen, but how could a nobody like her get an audience with the ruler of an empire? There was only one way. She had to find proof. Real proof that could not be denied. For 3 days, Yuna investigated. She watched Lord Taiho and his friends. She followed them when she could. She listened at doors. She searched for evidence. It was dangerous. If they caught her, they would kill her. But she thought of Hound, who had protected her when no one else would. She thought of her people, who would be blamed for a crime they did not commit. She kept searching. On the 3rd night, she found what she needed. Lord Taiho had been careless. He had written down the plan in a private journal. He had kept messages from his fellow conspirators. He thought no one would ever look in his personal rooms. He did not know that humans could be very good at getting into places they were not supposed to be. Yuna took pictures of everything with a small device she had brought from Earth. She had enough evidence to expose them all. But when she tried to leave Lord Taiho's rooms, she found guards waiting for her. "The little human spy," Lord Taiho said, stepping out of the shadows. "Did you think I would not notice you watching me? Did you think I was stupid?" Yuna's heart pounded. She was trapped. "I know what you are planning," she said. "I have proof. If anything happens to me, that proof will come out." Lord Taiho laughed. "Will it? I think not. I think you will have an accident tonight." A sad story. The human wandered where she should not have. She fell from a high window. Tragic. He walked toward her. His eyes were full of hate. "Any last words, human?" Yuna looked at him. She was terrified. But she did not show it. She had learned not to show fear. "Yes," she said. "You should have checked if your communication system was secure. Lord Taiho froze. What? Yuna held up her device. I am not just taking pictures. I am broadcasting. Everything you just said, everything in this room is being sent to every screen at the summit. Right now. Lord Taiho's face went white. That is impossible. You lie. Look outside. He turned to the window. In the distance, they could see the great hall where his summit was being held. Even from here, they could see beings running. They could hear alarms starting to sound. Yuna had learned something in her time among the stars. Humans were not strong. Humans were not fast. Humans did not live long. But humans were clever. And when they fought for something they loved, they fought with everything they had. You have failed, Yuna said. Everyone knows now. Everyone. Lord Taiho screamed in rage. He raised his hand to strike her. But before he could touch her, guards burst into the room. Real guards. Royal guards. They seized Lord Taiho and his followers. They put them in chains. Behind the guards came Princess Hound. Her face was terrible with anger. Her violet eyes burned like stars about to explode. She walked past the guards, past the captured conspirators, and stood in front of Yuna. You could have been killed, she said. Her voice shook. You would have been killed, Yuna replied. That mattered more. Hound stared at her. For a long moment she said nothing. Then the ancient princess, who had not cried in 200 years, felt tears running down her silver face. She pulled Yuna into her arms and held her tight. You impossible, stubborn, brave human, she whispered. What am I going to do with you? Yuna closed her eyes and let herself be held. Keep me, she said simply. If you want to. Hound laughed through her tears. I already said you were mine, she replied. I meant it. In the Great Hall, Lord Taiho and the conspirators were taken away to face justice. The other species watched in shock. A human had saved a Volanthi princess. A human had exposed corruption at the highest levels. Perhaps these small, short-lived creatures were more important than anyone had thought. And on her throne, Queen Soren watched the broadcast again and again. She watched the human girl stand before Lord Taiho with no weapons and no fear and bring down his entire conspiracy with nothing but courage and cleverness. The queen nodded slowly to herself. Yes, she understood now. She understood what her daughter saw in this human. It was time to give humanity the respect they had earned. The throne room was the largest room Yuna had ever seen. Pillars of silver glass rose toward a ceiling so high it disappeared into shadows. Thousands of beings stood in rows along the great hall. Representatives from every species in this part of the galaxy had come to witness this moment. Yuna walked down the center of the room. She wore simple clothes, black and white, the colors of Earth's diplomats. Her hair was pulled back from her face. Her hands were steady at her sides. Every eye in the room watched her. Just weeks ago, she had been a nobody, an aide, a small human in a galaxy of giants. Now she walked toward the throne of the most powerful empire in known space, and the universe held its breath. At the end of the long walk, Queen Soren sat on her throne. Her silver skin glowed under the lights. Her golden eyes tracked every step Yuna took. Beside her stood her daughters. The two older ones watched with cold curiosity. But Princess Hound watched with something else in her violet eyes. Pride, hope, love, ambassador. Dohn stood with the human delegation off to one side. His eyes were wet. He had never thought he would live to see this day. Yuna reached the base of the throne and stopped. She bowed her head in respect, but she did not kneel. Humans did not kneel. Not even the queens. Queen Soren studied her for a long moment. Park Yuna of Earth, the queen said. Her voice filled the hall. You have done something that no one thought possible. You survived our trials. You exposed traitors in our court. You protected our daughter when we could not." The queen rose from her throne. The room gasped. A queen never stood for anyone. "The Volanthi Empire has existed for 10,000 years, Queen Soren continued. "We have watched species rise and fall. We have seen empires come and go like seasons. In all that time, we have never been surprised. We thought we knew everything about what makes a being worthy." She walked down the steps until she stood before Yuna. Two women, one ancient and silver, one young and fragile. But they stood at the same height now. "You have shown us that we were wrong," the queen said. "You have shown us that worth is not measured in years lived or power held. Worth is measured in the fire that burns in a heart that refuses to give up." She looked out at the assembled beings. "The other species here have seen what humans can do. You have seen a small woman stand against lords and conspirators. You have seen courage that puts many of us to shame. You have seen what we have been too blind to see." Queen Soren turned back to Yuna. "So I ask you now, in front of all these witnesses, what do humans want?" The room was completely silent. Yuna took a breath. She thought of Earth. She thought of all the people who had worked so hard to send her here. She thought of every human who had ever looked up at the stars and dreamed. "We want to stand beside you," she said. Her voice was clear and strong. "Not beneath you. We want to be partners, not pets. We want to prove that the measure of a species is not how long they live or how far they have traveled." She lifted her head and met the queen's golden eyes. "The measure of a species is how hard they fight for what they love." Queen Soren was still. The whole room was still. Then, slowly, the queen inclined her head. It was the Volanthi gesture of respect. Not the bow of a superior to an inferior. The nod of one equal to another. "Then stand beside us, Park Yuna of Earth." The room exploded into sound. Some beings cheered. Others talked in excited voices. Ambassador Dohyun openly wept. The human delegation hugged each other. But Yuna barely heard any of it, because Princess Hound was walking toward her. Hound reached her and took her hand. In front of everyone. In front of the galaxy. "My mother asked me once why I chose you," Hound said softly. "Do you know what I told her?" Yuna shook her head. Hound smiled. It was the most beautiful thing Yuna had ever seen. "I told her, because she looked at an empire that could crush her, and she did not blink. Because she asked for dignity when everyone expected her to beg. Because she burned with a fire that made me remember what it felt like to be alive." She squeezed Yuna's hand. "I chose you because you were worth choosing, and I would choose you again, 1,000 times." Yuna felt tears on her face. She did not know when she had started crying. "I am just human," she whispered. "I will grow old. I will die. You will live for thousands more years after I am gone. Then I will live those years with your memory burning in my heart," Hound replied. "And that will be enough. That will be more than enough." They stood there, hand in hand, while the galaxy watched. And in that moment, everything changed. In the years that followed, humanity grew. They learned from the Volanthi. They traded with other species. They built stations and ships and became part of the great community of the stars. Ambassador Kang Do-hyun returned to Earth as a hero. He spent the rest of his life working to build bridges between worlds. Park Yuna never returned to Earth. She stayed on the Volanthi homeworld. First as the princess's companion, then as humanity's ambassador. She watched Hyun's older sisters step aside from the succession, choosing other paths. She watched Hound slowly rise to become the heir to the throne. And one day, many years later, she stood beside Hound as the princess became queen. The day Hound took the throne, she looked out at the assembled beings and made a speech about the future, about cooperation, about building a galaxy where every species had worth. After the ceremony, historians came to Una. They wanted to understand how everything had started, how a single human had changed the course of history. What was it? They asked. What made the difference? Una thought about the question for a long time. She saw me, Una said finally, when no one else did. She looked past my small size and short life and saw something worth protecting. And what did you see in her? Una smiled. Her hair was gray now. Her face had lines that had not been there before. But her eyes still burned with that same fire that had caught a princess's attention so many years ago. I saw someone who had forgotten how to hope, she said. And I thought, maybe I can remind her. Queen Hound found her later, standing on a balcony, looking up at the purple sky. Remembering? The queen asked. Always, Una replied. Hound stood beside her. They were both older now, changed by time and duty. But when their hands found each other, they fit together just as they always had. I claimed you once, Hound said, in a hall full of people who thought I was mad. I remember. I would do it again. Hyean's voice was soft. Every day, for the rest of eternity, I would do it again. Una leaned against her. Mine, she whispered. Yours, Hound agreed. And somewhere in the universe, on a small blue planet called Earth, children looked up at the stars and dreamed of the day they would join the galaxy. They did not know that the door had been opened for them by a woman who refused to blink. But they would learn, and they would carry that fire with them wherever they went. Because that is what humans do. They burn, and they never stop. The end.